Hey, welcome everybody. I'm Kelly Hoey, author of the book, Build Your Dream Network. And this is the highly anticipated conversation on pitching the media. And I'm here with my buddy, Molly. And she is a multimedia journalist and editor. For those who haven't come to Planet Hoey before, the silly name is as a result of a reader of my book who made the reference to Planet Hoey as why he was like, reading my advice, and it was worth the price of admission buying the book to come to Planet Hoey. So there we go. But today we're talking media and PR. Molly and I have got a lot to say, but you can chime in too. So if you're watching this on YouTube, use the comments, let us know you're here. But otherwise, we're going to dive on in. So Molly and I met because I was a source. And when I say to people I eat my own dog food on networking and relationship building, it's true. I do. So I was a source. We stayed in touch, and now we're much friendlier. And yeah, still a source on occasion. So anyway, Molly, for people those who don't know you, tell them about your really intriguing background to becoming a journalist.
Where should I start? We've joked before about the 5 jobs that I had before I became a journalist. I graduated college at a time when, oh my God, journalism was dying, which is a refrain we've probably heard for the last 50 years, and got into communications for nonprofit organizations. My master's is actually in corporate and public communications, and was doing that for a long time, but always had wanted to be, ever since I was a little kid, like a world traveling freelance writer. I'd always wanted to be freelance. And so about a decade ago now, during the height of the last economic collapse, by the way, I left my stable cubicle job with a good pension and a 401k. Who has that anymore, right? Left it and moved to Washington, and then transitioned into living half in Europe and half in DC for many, many years, and then moved back to California a couple years ago. And so my experience as a journalist started as an experience as a communicator. And so I think I have a particular take on when I get press releases because I know what's happening. Like, I can translate what's happening behind the press release. And I know when somebody is just sending me a press release because their boss walked into their office and said, "We need media. You need to email journalists. Why are you not emailing more journalists?" And, and what that means and how that comes across, and what your actual success rate is going to be in getting stories or being used as a source, because I've been on both sides of it.
Yeah. Well, we're going to talk about that. I want to say shout out and hello to Mary Cardy, who is in Dublin and was chatting with me the other day. Hey, Mary, thank you for being here. And I know it's evening there for you. So thank you, Mary, for being with us. Okay. So I bet you have your list. And we're going to get back to press releases and like rip those. And I bet you have your list. And I have my 4 pages of pitches that have pissed me off. So let's go mano a mano for shitty pitches, Molly.
Oh my goodness. I got to the point where I keep a bad pitch file, right? I was deleting a lot of things for a long time. And then when I was on the board of the National Press Club in DC, I would occasionally teach, comm sessions or mentoring sessions. And now it's great to have them as visual aids. The worst offenders now go into my bad pitch file as examples of what not to do. And there are a lot of them.
All right. Well, could you share one with us? And then I might like to find one to share.
Oh, some of the ones that we've been talking about on Twitter over the last week have really been, at the height. I think one of the things that we've been talking about a lot is the people that email journalists after, like, they'll see an article comes out. And again, back from, I can translate what's happening in your office because I've been in your office, right? An article will come out and somebody's boss will walk into their communications office and say, "Hey, we should have been in that we should have been interviewed for that. This is our subject matter expertise. Why were we not in that article?" And instead of the PR person reaching out and saying, "Hey, we actually cover this if we can ever be a resource. These are the sorts of topics we work on. Please keep us in mind," which would be great and I would love. They instead email and say, "Hey, that article that you've already written, had edited, gone through legal, published, and is now out in the world, can you just go back and add a paragraph about us in it?" And
I put matches, all the matches in my house. I put them in the other room so I wouldn't have to do a public hair on fire moment.
Kelly, that happens so often. It is such a common thing for journalists to get. And it really just makes me lose my mind because from a comm standpoint, it's a train wreck, right? So as a journalist, my answer is like, no, that's dumb. Like, of course I'm not doing that for you. Even if I wanted to, which no journalist would ever want to, it's just, we're not bloggers sitting in our basement updating things with sponsored links to get eyes on content. Like that's not how that works for journalism. Oh. Really, right? I know.
I'm sitting down. I'm not going to fall over. But you've given the secret away. Those who are smart enough to be here for the live conversation, you heard it. You don't have to go. You can rewind and watch this later. You've given it away. You write a story. You see a story. You see that the journalist has covered your area. That journalist doesn't know about you. You reach out and say, by the way, here's what we do. Here's how it relates to your story. By the way, I see you write on this beat all the time. If we can be of help, here's how to find us.
Absolutely. Boom. And that's, I mean, Kelly, that's a huge point. I think so many PR people are worried about finding journalists, right? They're worried about finding journalists to get media. And I guest lecture at the graduate program at Quantico every so often. And one of the things I always say to them is, you know, there's no such thing as media. Like saying media is like saying the military, right? Most people intrinsically know there's a difference between, you know, a naval commander and a Coast Guard captain and the US Marine Corps. I mean, they know these things, but they don't get the concept that there's broadcast media and podcast media and audio like NPR and online journalists and print journalists and magazine journalists and features and breaking news and investigative. And they're pitching things as though it's, we're going to send you a press release and you're going to run it immediately as it is. Maybe you'll put your byline on it, maybe not. But we're just going to give it to you and you have an article. And I would say to that, well, first, no. First,
no.
But one of the things I would always say is worry less about finding journalists and worry more about making it easy for journalists to find you. Right. I cannot tell you how many times, I mean, finding sources is part of my job. I'm doing that all the time, even when I don't have a deadline. So, you know, I'm looking for sources, I'm looking for subject matter expertise, you know, in certain areas, and I'll find a college, I'll find a professor that's published a paper, I'll find a nonprofit organization. And I love being able to share nonprofits that are doing great work. I mean, I love being able to interview them if I can get them on the phone, but maybe they don't have a phone number anywhere on their website. Maybe they don't have an email anywhere on their website. I mean, I even go down and look to see if they have like a street address, and will, you know, the modern equivalent of calling information. I mean, like, how do I get the main number here? Let alone having every organization, everybody that ever has even thought about sending a press release in their life should have a media contact number on their page. And I don't care if it's a generic, you know, phone number for your company that an intern answers, but you need to have a dedicated spot of information for journalists to contact you. Yeah. And without that, I just don't even, I can't take you seriously if as somebody that wants to interact with journalists.
Well, thank you for this. And I want to dive into all of this kind of stuff. And some of this is like, where's the direct contact? And then operationally at that company or organization, what's the flow as opposed to like having a clear, I want to say sort of matrix when your company gets called by a journalist, what are the stories and what's the information you're going to give so that you can give a media source a yes or no? Like, yes, Molly, that's the kind of story we want to give. Like, not like it's not an opportunity when Molly or someone calls you and has that inbound interest for you to start negotiating on what the story is, what's going to happen. Like, no. Yes or no, is it your kind of story? And when's the right time for the journalist to talk to you? Not when it's convenient. Oh, I can get on her calendar next Tuesday after 4. No.
This is how I think about it. I hate shopping. I'm a terrible shopper. I wear my clothes till they fall apart. I hate going to a store. But when I do go to a store, I know it's because I need a pair of black slacks. And if I walk into your store and ask if you have a pair of black slacks and you don't carry black slacks, that's totally fine. There's no hard feelings. But if you physically won't let me leave the store because you want to sell me a red sweater, I don't need a red sweater. that's a problem. I might come back to you later for a red sweater, but right now I need black slacks. And so often when I reach out to PR people, like, it's okay to tell me that you don't work on that area. That happens. But if we have a good interaction, I called somebody yesterday for a story. After chatting for 5 minutes, she's like, this actually isn't my expertise, but I work in this area. And I said, oh, wow, you know what? That's actually, like, that's not relevant for this story that I need to meet my deadline on at 5 o'clock. But I would love to chat with you at some point about that when I'm not on a deadline, to learn more about this work and how it informs other reporting that I do now and might do in the future as a result of our conversation, which was wonderful. I've made a new source. Didn't really work for what I needed, but I'm still thrilled. And at some point I'll go back to her. So those are the sorts of relationships that I think people really need to be thinking about contextually, other than one press release equals one story, because that just never happens. And I don't know that it's ever happened in the history of communications.
No. I was going to say, one of the things I was thinking of is there was a journalist with Adweek who years ago was put in touch with me for a story for South by Southwest. It's when I had the Startup Accelerator and was doing all that kind of stuff. And understanding, kind of his job, he sort of emailed me. I emailed back and I said, yes, happy to talk. If it's faster for you to reach me, text me and I'll immediately pick up the phone. Whatever you need, right? And I think, frankly, I gave the information he needed for that story, but the responsiveness, understanding the pressures of his job, his timeline. For years, he has texted me on other stories, knowing that I will say yes or no. And if it's a no, I will give him 2 or 3 solid recommendations of other sources.
Sure. And I think, that's how you and I met. Right. And how we've stayed in touch all this time. We met because of a mutual friend. I was doing another story years ago and texted my friend and said, hey, do you know somebody who's working in this space? And she said, oh, yeah, you actually should know Kelly. And so, Kel, I think it's been 5 or 6 years now. It's been a while. Like, it's been a couple states and maybe a few countries.
So let's go back. I want to go back. Sorry to interrupt. Let's go back to this whole concept of how you get found by the media. And you and I were talking about this before. And it's like, yes, have the contact information. But if you're an individual, this is, where one of those things where I say to people, this is why you've got to have a proper headshot and a fully complete LinkedIn profile, right? Like, are you connected to the other
But you love LinkedIn.
What's that?
I know you love LinkedIn. I hate LinkedIn.
But if you're looking for a source,
my professional life is on Twitter. Yeah.
Well, no, that's where my professional life is. But if I want people to verify my expertise,
sure,
that's kind of my depository of all that. If I'm going to chat away, but because I'm assuming, what's the waterfall when you if you saw someone and they were chatting away on a subject and you're thinking, oh, they might be a good source. You see them on Twitter. What do you do to find out more about them?
I did that. We were doing the virtual water cooler and your friend Ian, who's Lottie Doll's CEO, we were chatting about how we were all moving to remote platforms and what a challenge that was. And I DM'd him immediately during the water cooler and said, hey, I'm actually working on a story about teams that are going remotely. And, I'd love to chat with you about your experience. It was not about dolls. It wasn't about business. It wasn't necessarily about how they're managing warehouse and distributing during a pandemic. It was, tell me how you're running your team right now. And, that story which came out a couple weeks ago, I interviewed Ian, but then I also interviewed the team at the Eurodesk podcast at Georgetown. And I also interviewed Tara, your friend Tara. And so it was Tara Hunt. And so it was deliberately, I was looking for geographic diversity. I was looking for different types of teams. I was looking for how different workflows were working on different platforms as a result of now going all remotely. That's what I'm looking for. So people that are always kind of putting up their 55-year-old white CEO to talk about their new product, that's not somebody I want to. I don't cover products. I don't want to hear how great Brad is. It's not how I work. The flip side too to that is, so Carson at the Nature Conservancy, who I hope is watching here, she's one of my favorite go-to sources. I have written on environmental issues. I just did a big reporting project along the U.S.-Mexican border about public land management. But because she's so responsive, like you were saying, because I know I can call her or email her and get a response back pretty quickly, and she gets how journalism works, I mean, I called her for a story on how teams are now working on certain digital platforms, because I knew she would either say to me very quickly, like, yes, that's something we can talk to, or no, that's something we can't talk to. And I would move on. Unlike yesterday where I reached out to somebody that I thought was an expert in the field and they're like, oh, cool. We're their person's PR team. Send over some questions, which I don't typically do. And then they got back to me like 4 or 5 hours later and said, oh yeah, we can't talk to that, but here's like a pitch paragraph about our company and why we're so awesome. And I hope this is helpful. And I just remember, I was like, this is really, really not helpful. Like, you've just wasted my day. And I have no information from you now. So, and because it was a PR firm, of course, I'm terrified now that I'm going to be on their spam list for, everything for all time, which is also not helpful.
No, and those kind of things. But yeah, and this sort of being found, like, are you talking about an area? Are you being that kind of generous person? Are you sharing insights? Are you only just kind of me, like marketing, as opposed to, this is how we run our business, or these are the things I care about. And guess what? I'm interested in listening to what other people care about. If Molly or someone like clicks on your links on your Twitter profile, does it actually go to something, or is it a broken link? Is there information there? If she wanted to verify that you are an expert, are you connected to the other experts on LinkedIn, or is it like a little blue head and, a bunch of incomplete stuff? Like, come on, people. This is like so foundational, and you don't need to hire a goddamn PR firm to do it for you.
Well,
right?
And back to what we were saying earlier, right? Like, does your information match what you're telling me? That's a big thing. I mean, really, right? Because I vet, look, I do long form investigations and I do quick hit feature pieces. And obviously I'm vetting sources all the time for a number of reasons, right? But if you're telling me that you're in Portland, Oregon, and you're talking about, your home in Washington State. Now, I know that Portland and Vancouver are right across the river from each other because I used to live in Portland. But those are also still two totally different things. Well, either you're in Portland or you're in Washington. And which is it? Because you're telling me one thing and your background information tools are telling me something else. Now, as somebody who lives multiple places and travels a lot and can be really hard to track down, there's some room for that. But I also need to make sure that, your information's stacking up.
Right. Because it's a signal as opposed to everything else they're giving you. Right. I'm an expert in this. Right. You can't even tell me where you live.
Unless you're like me and you're an expert in not telling people where you live and being off grid as much as possible, which is its own thing. But yeah, no.
Yeah, well, I would say given the number of the people just not listening. And one of my pet peeves, particularly from dealing with early stage companies and founders, is when they hire PR firms too soon. And all they are is it's almost like the PR firms justify the spend, the cost, by saying we sent out 500 press releases today.
Exactly. And so my very first job out of grad school was I worked for a PR and advertising agency. And the way that they measured their success to their clients and the way that they presented it every year. Now, granted, this was a long time ago, but I'm still seeing some of this in the way people are reaching out to me is, how many mentions did you get? Doesn't matter quality, doesn't matter in what context. Like, how many times was your name physically in newspaper, online, blog, whatever? How many, inches of space back when it was still measured in inches and column inches? And how many journalists did you reach out to? I never will forget one of the worst, and this is before I kept my bad pitch file, but I actually don't need it because I almost have it memorized with how bad it was. So years ago, I got an email. And the guy had copied, not BCC'd, CC'd 100 journalists, right? I think I might have been living in the UK at the time. And the email starts, I know it's 4:00 on a Friday afternoon and none of you all probably want to hear this, is how the email started. He said, but we're tabling at this conference on Saturday and you should all come by our booth. And that was the email. And I remember thinking, okay, I don't know who you are, first of all. I have no idea who you are. I'm not attending this conference in Cleveland, Ohio tomorrow. It's not like he got the press list from the conference attendees, right? He just emailed every journalist that he knew. I I'm not attending this conference. I'm not flying to Cleveland to attend this conference. You're not offering a press access to, like, what are you doing? And it was clear to me that his boss came in and said, oh, hey, did we reach out to journalists about the table tomorrow? Or, oh yeah, we should really get some journalists. We should get media coverage of our booth. And when he should have said, okay, you know what, that's kind of not really how it works. You know, because as the comms people, you are the comms experts for your organization. You are not only responsible for reaching out to journalists, but you're responsible for schooling your principals on what is and is not best practice, right? He just blasted out this random email and could go back to his boss and say, oh, okay, I emailed 100 journalists. And then Monday he was probably like, yeah, none of them came, but maybe it was just a busy weekend for journalism. So we missed the table at the conference in Cleveland that none of us were attending and didn't know about. Like,
right. Why? I think we clarify for people too the difference between journalists. You are a journalist.
I'm a journalist.
And when you go to something like so many sites now where they have contributors, like I'm a former contributor to Inc. and to Forbes and others. Let's distinguish that for people.
Yeah. So for a long time, contributor was pretty much a dirty word within the journalism community because it represented people who were not trying to make their living from journalism, providing free content to promote their platforms and their tools. And there are news outlets that built their platform on unpaid contributor work. Now, these people are all probably subject matter experts and have great things to say and whatever, but they're not journalists. And so, I wish I had known you were going to ask me this question because I need to keep the ranting.
The way I always put it, when someone refers to me as a journalist, I'm like, please do not insult my journalist friends by calling me that.
I worked for one outlet who shall not be named, but you can probably figure out who it is, who, had a lot of financial advisors for a very long time, decided they needed journalists writing about finance as opposed to finance guys trying to write about journalists. And I say guys because it was almost all guys. And so they brought a bunch of us journalists in and trained us in this like boot camp of investing and finance. It was amazing. I loved it. And then opened up a contributor platform. And so they started having random people around the world who were not journalists and not financial people kind of contributing unpaid pieces about, what they thought were good stocks. And literally within 6 months, they fired all of the paid journalists and just started using free content from their contributors. So there's two obviously big challenges with that. Is first, are outlets relying on unpaid contributions over journalism, right? And the second is it's not always clear that the pieces that are being contributed are op-ed pieces, they're PR placement pieces, and not journalism. And so in the context of media literacy and readers not always knowing what's journalism, fake news, PR placement, spin, opinion, whatever, that line has really gotten very blurry over the years in a way that concerns me.
Yeah. So I part of it, kind of conversation on this is as contributing, and most of the sites are all the same in terms of the amount they want a contributor to contribute. And there's an element for me of why am I building somebody else's business on a really crappy economic model versus building my own business. So if I want to opine on networking, I will do it on my own site and make myself available to be found by journalists to give them those expert opinions and have a story that is well researched and well thought of and kind of feeds the model better that way. And I guess I would just say to anyone watching, still getting quoted and cited, people can talk about the demise of media. It is still a very powerful way to build your business, showcase your not-for-profit, personal brand. I hate using that word, or words, but it's still so powerful. And so building that network, building that relationship with a journalist by understanding their job, understanding what they do, understanding what their needs are, what they work on, why it is so so vital. I want to say in that way. And it's not Come on, people. It's not that difficult.
The thing I also think people don't fully grasp is, for a feature piece, which is say 800 to 1,200 words, roughly, right, depending on the outlet, I'll interview 3 to 5 people. So if somebody thinks that they're the only one, like that it's a profile piece, it's not.
It's not all about me, Molly.
It's all about you, Kelly, all the time. And it was actually really refreshing because I just did a story about this really innovative chef that's attempting to overhaul hospital food for a huge system in a way that's sustainable and locally sourced and healthier for the patients and all of that. And I went, and he said to me like 7 or 8 times, this is not just about me. Please do not just make it about me. Please don't just put photos of me in it. This is about the team. And I finally said to him, like, dude, I don't write celebrity puff pieces. Like, this is like, you're nice and you're very photogenic, but like, no, that's not what's happening here. So, right. The flip side of that though, is I seldom have interviews that are less than, anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes, even on just basic quick stuff. I may use 2 or 3 lines of what you've said, but I'll stack, like the last interview we did, we had a great chat and I've used it in 3 or 4 different articles that are still coming out. And so I think, the big picture of it all is, again, back to what we were talking about, what we've talked with our friend Lyndon online, is this idea that you're going to be a resource rather than a placement. Like,
yes,
nobody has ever placed a story through me. Like that that idea is silly, but I have a lot of people that I have vetted, that have given me good information, that have expanded my understanding of a topic, and I'll keep going back to them time and time again.
Yeah, and which is what you want. I mean, when I'm like looking at people who are watching this and taking notes or whatever, you want to be that source. Like, a constant drip of media beats one hit anytime. And I just want to share, there was one story that came out around the time my book came out, and the journalist reached out to me on a direct message on Twitter. She had been looking for a source on networking. She's like, it seems you talk about this a lot. So it's like, okay, what are the hashtags on Twitter? Where are the conversations? Understanding my swim lane. Like, this is what I talk about. This is what I care about. I'm not all things to all people. And so we got on the phone. I shared with her like my thoughts, and she's like, holy shit, this is not the way I'd thought about networking. Oh. She ended up writing a piece that appeared for Vogue and Vogue.com. And I was the only source because she was like, this was like so different than anything else she ever heard. And it turned into all about me. But it didn't start that way. Oh.
I think I would add to that, right? I mean, exactly to your point is we are all so much more than our jobs too, right? We don't just operate in this bubble. Like, I guest lecture on journalism and I talk about press freedom and I panel and whatever, but I have hobbies and I'm a human and I'm, somebody that's dealing with Bay Area housing right now. So we all have these areas of expertise just for nature, for the perspective of walking through this earth, right? We all know different things. And so as we're talking, back to the example of Ian and running his team remotely.
Yeah.
Or the perspective of talking to Tara, where she was like, hey, you know what? Like, our productivity is a little bit low right now, but we're really focusing on keeping our team's morale high. And it's not just a matter of switching over to Slack or Zoom. It's a matter of really making sure we're maintaining our connections and our mental health and our soft skills and really making sure that we're all okay at the end of this too. That's a perspective that, if somebody had just sent me a press release about this team is now working on Slack, this is where you can find it, we might have missed that. Yeah.
Exactly.
Nobody cares about who's on Slack anymore.
As I like to say to people, that you exist is not a story. Your mother that may care that you have a startup, and those are
the pitches that I get. I get the talk to Dave. I talk to talk to Bob. Bob is great. Like, I don't.
Good on you, Bob. You and Brad can sit in the corner because we don't want to talk to you.
Like, unless you're trying to fix me up with Bob, I don't get why you're pitching me Bob as a human. Like, what is happening right now?
I have to put this up. Anna, we're loving Loving that you are here. Yeah, come on. I love the comments coming in. Please, if you've got questions for us, obviously we're into answering and hearing the sounds of our own voices. So thank you, Anna, for being here. And for everyone who's listening, we're referring to Ian, who we're referring to as Ian Harkin, founder of Lottie Dolls. Just a really genuine, amazing human being. And Tara is Tara Hunt. She's the founder of Truly Social and Flywheel out of Toronto. And actually, if you're looking for marketing and really tremendously useful, powerful social content guidance, there is no one better than Tara. Her YouTube series, the stuff she gives away on her site, like go and see what she's doing, because you're probably paying for someone to give you some shitty advice once you read what Tara's up to. So there we go. Yes. Oh yeah. Yes. Thank you, Mary. Love your comment. And thank you for being up late there in Dublin to hang with us always. I know I saw this. Yes. You know what? We don't want to just dish and be angry. We also want to make people laugh.
So James is one of the people that gets forwarded emails from me going, what the hell is this press release? Please tell them no.
Yeah. Hey, and thank you, 8th and Home Real Estate and Relocation. I love that you keep coming back to Planet Hoey and hanging out and doing all this. So if you're just joining, I'm chatting with Molly McCluskey. She is a multimedia journalist and editor. Okay, Molly, come on, spill some more of the bad pitches. Because, I mean, people are paying money for this shit, and it's shit, and it drives me crazy.
Okay, so here's one. So, and again, I don't even need to crack open my bad pitch file because I've got this one memorized because I probably need to like do therapy for it. So the other thing I get a lot is, especially because I'm freelance, right? I don't know that staff journalists get this all the time. I haven't talked to them about it, but freelancers get it a lot, right? Where, hi, I see you write for US News and World Report. Can you help me place a story there? No. And I'm using US News because that's them today, but or, hey, here's a pitch. And I'm like, oh, that's not what I cover. And they're like, great. Can you shop it around to your colleagues? No, honey, because I'm not your comms person. But this is one that has a special place of honor in the bad pitch folder. So this was a couple years ago. I was writing a lot for Jazeera English, and I was also the DC correspondent for Middle East Eye, and I was covering lots of the information about refugees and the Muslim ban and American politics in terms of the Middle East. And so I got this woman, and again, had never met her in my life. And I have a thing about a lot of things, but if you don't know me, don't ask me for favors. Like, don't just show up and demand something from me. Like, say hi, introduce yourself, like manners. So this woman inserts herself in my inbox and says, I got your card from a colleague, which means I also have never met you personally, but okay. She said, I got your card from a colleague. I see you write for Al Jazeera English. We are trying to place an op-ed in Al Jazeera Arabic. Can you take care of that for us? And then she attached the op-ed. And I was like, okay, there's so many, because a lot of my greatest hits in the bad pitch file have multiple levels of insanity, right? But that was really, I don't know you. I'm not your comms person. I don't write for Al Jazeera Arabic. It's a lovely platform. I just don't write for them. I don't have editors there. I don't know anybody there. It's a different outlet. Why are you sending me attachments?
Why are you asking this in the first freaking place?
No. And there wasn't even kind of any intro of self-awareness of, hey, look, I know that this is not a thing that we should be asking you. If you have any advice, we'd appreciate. No, just like here. I mean, I got a similar email, and we've also talked about this recently, from a woman I worked with 10 years ago on LinkedIn, who I've not kept in touch. Lovely human, but I've not kept in touch with her at all. And she just sent me an email. I was like, oh, my hairdresser's daughter is about to graduate from college. Here's her resume. Find her a job. And she attached the resume. And I was like, just say hi first. How you doing, Molly? What's going on? How's your life been? Can I ask you?
Can I impose on you? I want to help someone get a journalism job. Is there anything you can recommend? Like, a resume and find her a job?
Here's a resume, find her a job. Here you go. Just
So I want to off you go, because you don't have a deadline or anything, Molly. You don't have anything like that. So I in my bad pitch file that I kept, and I kept this for a program I did for startup founders on PR and media, because it frustrated me so much, the amount of money they were spending at a time when they have no revenue on these things. And I'm like, no, what are you doing? So I used to get things like this. Dear Kelly, we've created the first truly autonomous smart suitcase, blah, blah, blah. If you decide to write about us, we'd be grateful if you could include a link to our Indiegogo page. Yeah. How about X and Y, children 7 and 11 who are siblings, and they created an app in the summer, and they're smart, articulate, and really cute. And would I write about them?
No.
Yes. And I was going to say this line in particular, because I think I want you to dissect this line, because you see it probably, it drives me insane. I can only imagine for you. Please let me know if you'd like more info or would like to set up an interview. What the fuck?
So
I have nothing else to do in my day but interview people to see if there's a story.
Here's the thing that makes me lose my mind. And it is, if you ever want to get a really rude email from me, you can do this, because I've sent some doozies out in response to this, right? So, and it's always like, I can always tell it's like your first PR job after college, right? Or like you're an intern, and there's room for that. Like I will give you lots and lots of room for that, because when I was first starting out in PR, I didn't know what I was doing and I made a fool of myself. And so I give people lots and lots of room for that. However, so I get these press releases and I ignore them because they're dumb. And I'm going to be gracious and pretend for both of our sakes that you didn't send this to me. That's a gift that I'm giving you. That's a gift of grace that I am giving you, to pretend that you did not just send me this email. And so I ignore it. And a day or two later, they write me back and say, oh, hey, like just following up. Do you have any feedback? And then they'll write me back again and be like, hey, I'd love to, get your perspective on how you think I did with delivering this press release to you. And it's, I'm not your mother, your lover, your teacher, or your friend. Like, it is not my job to hold your hand and walking you through how to pitch a journalist. And like, who told you it was? Because that's a conversation you need to have with that person.
Right.
I mean, the feedback thing is, I'm not going to sit here and hop on a Skype with you and coach you in like a comms 101 class. I'm just not. I am a freelancer. I am paid on work output. I am not on a salary. I do a lot of mentoring and volunteer work, but that's not it. So that's the one that I just, like a bad pitch is one thing, and being presumptuous and being rude and not spelling my name right, or just throwing a press release at me is one thing, but the constant, like, I need feedback and I need to learn my job and it's your job to teach me my job is, I can't. I don't know.
No. Yeah. You went to school. You've got a brain between your ears.
Like, if you are sending me this, somebody has told you. Like, you didn't just wake up in your house one morning and decide, I'm going to spam Molly McCluskey a bunch of press releases. Like, somebody has told you to go do this. Go talk to them. Hold on, Antonella just had a question.
Yeah. We're gonna pull this up. I love this. Okay.
That's a pretty good one.
How about being asked by PR to have a non-story pitch, really no story there, published on a major news outlet you used to work for in the past? Oh, no.
Antonella is a phenomenal international journalist. She's worked for Reuters, is now a stellar freelancer. Absolutely incredible human. But that cracks me up. Yeah, that's no. Yeah, I mean, that would be a great question to say, hey, we're looking to pitch this outlet. Do you have any tips? No.
You used to work there? Even if you said you used to work there?
No.
If it was someone you knew. Nope. I am not your pitching guru to outside publications. That is a communications function that you should be hiring people to do for you. Yeah.
Like, no. I mean, people tend to think that journalists are their stenographers. Like, we're not. And no, I mean, no, there's enough resources out there right now. And I know, and Antonella knows, because we were both like chair of the freelance committee and on the board of the National Press Club, where we would put together resources and panels and discussions and newsletters, and all these resources exist in the world. But to me, the just throwing things out there like a fire hose is like the guy at the bar that thinks a successful evening is how many numbers you can get.
No.
And not actually having a conversation with another human being.
Right.
That's what that is. And no, I have no patience for it.
Well, but also, I mean, some of this too, like I'm thinking, like if you go to the New York Times website, the Twitter handles of like all their journalists are there. So it's like, oh yeah, it's not that hard, people. You can find these people. Then you could follow them, and you could see what they talk about, and then you could see what their beat is, and where, and then you can think, oh, let me put 2 and 2 together, and here maybe this would be something they'd be interested in.
Number of people who have pitched me stories without, and have pitched me on Twitter without following me on Twitter, and have pitched me on LinkedIn without actually following me on LinkedIn, and have never looked at my website. I don't understand your brain. Like,
right.
And also the other thing too is like, if anybody has ever reached out to me and said, hey, Molly, we know you work on a ton of different things. This is what we're working on right now. What are you working on, and can we help? I would respond to those emails. I spent a year working on stories about incarcerated kids in America. Anybody that was an expert in that field, I wanted to talk to.
Yeah.
I spent a year working on corporate financing of academic research at public universities. Anybody in that field, I wanted to talk to. But don't, I ran a story on CityLab about scooters in Boulder, and some random dude like sends me a press release, and I'm like, where did you get my information from? He's like, oh, I don't know. I just Googled around until I found it. Hope you'll run this story. And I wrote back, I'm not going to. And if you had asked me, instead of spamming me, I would have told you that and saved us both a little bit of time. Like, I just, the information is out there for you.
Right.
I'm not also then going to give you a like specialized invitation. I have a standard no pitch policy. Like, I do not want people to pitch me across the board. And I'm pretty public about that. And if you've done any kind of research, you would know that. So I really am kind of, it's a very entitled, arrogant approach. And people are asking for your time every time they're doing it. And sometimes they're demanding your time because they feel entitled to your time. And sometimes they're requesting your time. And if they're requesting my time, I usually respond favorably. Yeah. But the rest of it, I just don't have patience for.
Well, when I was writing or contributing to Inc., I wrote a piece. It was a social entrepreneurship piece. But it was also because so many early stage companies sort of like, and we donate. I'm like, yeah, that's nice. If you're not making money and you have a shitty product, I really don't care that you have this social consciousness, because who cares, right? You're not making money and you've got a shitty product. You can't, put lipstick on the pig that way. So I wrote a piece on a company, and it happened to be a mattress company, but it was their CEO is a serial entrepreneur. I had, anyway, long story short, the number of pitches I got on, I see you write about mattress company.
You're the expert on mattresses.
My thing is not mattress company CEO profiles.
Well, look, I don't do book reviews. I think I maybe have done one. I'm working on another one now, but they're very contextual to my beat areas of foreign affairs, global issues, social justice, economic inequality. So within that pyramid, occasionally if an interesting book comes out, I'll cover it. But don't just send me your book and be like, hey, do me a favor and review my book. I'm like, well, it's not a favor. Like, I'm a freelancer, so I don't have editors. I don't contribute in that area. I'm not going to spend 3 to 6 months to try to place a story outside of my beat area that I might get $100 for to do you a favor. Like, it's just, people don't understand the way the market works and what it means to be a freelancer versus a staff writer. Like, I don't have a Monday morning staff meeting with my editor where I'm like, oh, hey, here are all the pitches that came my way. Any interest in any of these? And I'm still paid whether or not we publish them or not. I mean, every story that I do is an investment that I recoup, if I'm lucky, 3 to 6, several months down the line, depending on the outlet.
Right. So, I mean, that's there we go, kids. Like, go and do some research, figure out who's employed by, an outlet, whatever that may be, radio, paper, TV, long lead me, who's a real employee and who's a freelancer. Understand the economics are different. Their attention span is different. Maybe their tolerance for shitty pictures is different. I don't know. We'll throw that one out there. Yeah. You don't want to get pitched, but if someone was to say, I have read everything, we can be a source and helpful to you. That kind of a pitch, so to speak.
If somebody ever says that they have read everything I've ever written, they would have my undying attention, because I was rebuilding my website recently, and I found articles that I had forgotten that I had written 15 years ago.
Right. So if someone noticing, oh, I see, Molly, you write over here on this. You've written these kinds of stories. We could be helpful. Here's what we've done, and here's where you can contact us. Having that sort of like potential source in a file, that's okay. But hey, can you write about Me Too? The Me Too stories, I call them. Oh, hey, Me Too. I've done that. I've have a mattress company. You don't want those.
No, and I. So here's the other point I would make too, is that people seldomly pitch me for my work. Like, they seldomly pitch me to be included in my body of work, which covers very specific beat areas, which you can find on my website. They want to be in the outlet that I write for.
Yeah.
And that is that's a non-starter. And that's a non-start. And again, I'm going to use US News, A, because I love the team there, but B, because I've been writing for them a lot this week. I'll get pitches that say, I want to be in US News. It's like, okay, great. Like,
good on you.
Like, I want to be in, the New Yorker. Like, as long as we're making wishes, like, let's talk about some stuff, right? But it's never, I want to contribute in a meaningful way to this series you're doing on X. I had somebody reach out to me on Twitter recently who was like, I see you're writing on teleworking and homeschooling. And I'm like, yeah, I just did a story on that. Probably not going to do an identical story, but I might do something in that space again soon. She's like, well, great. We have lots of contacts in that area. Well, okay, but she didn't tell me, do you have contacts in that area because you're a PTA mom, because you're a school principal, because you develop ed tech? Like, there was no context for that. And then I wrote her back and said, okay, well, I mean, maybe, like, if you have interesting resources you want to send me, like, send them to me, that's fine. And so she sent me one company that she had copied and pasted a blurb from the website. And she put, and here's a blurb for you to use. I'm like, I don't use blurbs. Like, thank you. I don't use I'm a writer. I can write my own sentences. And then when the article came out and I didn't use it, she then wrote me and said, you didn't include, your article that just published didn't include my company. Again, I don't know, are you the hired PR rep? Is it your firm, your husband's firm, your hairdresser's kids? Like, you've given me no context about this, but now you're mad that I didn't include it. And you asked me to go back into the already published article and add a paragraph about a company that I did not vet or research, sent to me by a woman that I don't know, into an already published, like, no. And it was so ridiculous. Part of me wants to sit down with her and be like, okay, let me tell you why this is crazy. And
well, hopefully she's watching this. We could just send her the video.
She might be. I don't think she follows me on Twitter. But, it's just, like, again, back to what we were saying at the beginning of the multiple levels of, like, no, everything about this is wrong. I can't, and I don't have time for that. Again, I'm paid per article. I interview 3 to 5 sources per feature. It can be hundreds for long form investigation, quite literally hundreds of sources, plus data, plus going through government resources and documents. And if you're not providing any kind of information or value, you're just kind of in the way.
Blacklisted. Totally blacklisted.
Blacklist.
And this is also too where I sort of think where what you're saying is when you publish something, as I like to say, the second day story, to be able to say to someone, this is interesting. If you write on this again, here's why I may have some other interesting sources for you. Or if this is continues to be a series and you've thought about this angle.
But I don't get that. You do that to me when we talk, which I appreciate. Like you say, hey, have you thought about this too? And I will say, as a standard part of my interview process across the board, and I actually teach this when I teach classes, I always, you always open with thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me, because unless someone is a government spokesperson, they're under no obligation to speak to you. My ability to do my job is to be able to get people to share their stories with me, right? And by their stories, I don't necessarily mean their new product launch.
Right.
But it's just, I just, Kelly, you're thinking about like, but I don't get pitched, I get pitched the same story. And so at the end of every interview, I don't care who I'm talking to. I don't care if, we've talked for 20 minutes or 3 hours. At the end of every interview, I always say, is there anything else you wish I knew about this topic that I didn't ask you? Is there anything, and I learned that the hard way, because when I was in grad school writing alumni profiles for my magazine, my school's magazine, I did a whole interview with an alumni about their relationship with the school and walked out and realized their whole wall was covered with them on Harleys, and they spend half the year traveling the country on Harleys. And I realized, I didn't ask them about that. That's an interesting part of the story. And so now I always say, like, is there anything that you wish that I knew? And that's a good time to say to me, hey, by the way, we're also, like, we talked about X, but just so you know, like in 3 months or 6 months, we're rolling out a new program, we're doing whatever. This might be something you want to keep in mind. Not, hey, we have a new hire. You should interview our new hire, George. George is great. He collects dogs. Like, I get those press releases. I have never written about a company change. Some people do. I mean, there are journalists out there that cover like who's moving in the industry and who's, you ran this company and now you're running this company. And like, that's great. They want to interview George. I don't want to interview George.
Right. Don't send the George stories. Don't send the George stories. But it's sort of like this is where it's like, give your ideas. This is one of those places where I would sort of think with journal, like if you're pitching this way, like give the ideas away. And that's part of why I sort of say, have you thought about this angle? Because, there's stuff I'm reading. And when I talk to you or another journalist, it's like, here's this, but there's also, this might be out in left field. And you could say to me, yeah, that's out in left field. It's no good. But it might be like, oh, hold on a minute here. Here's something else that could extend an existing, kind of theme of stories and get back to the other ones that you've written. I love this. Read their story, not just one story. We gotta highlight that.
If somebody, like, it would be like a birthday present. If somebody emails me, it would also be a little creepy, but we could figure that out. There's a line, but like if somebody emailed me and said, Molly, I have read every story you've ever done, including the blog post you wrote about the new coffee shop in Indonesia that served cupcakes in an art gallery, which was a real story that I did when I was living in Indonesia. But like that nobody's ever seen because it's for an outlet that I don't even think is like still in existence anymore. You'd have my attention.
Right.
You would do your research.
Well, it's a bit of respect also too to know, was this like a one time that she was doing a freelance story on X, or is this like a regular kind of thematic thing? And maybe, she's writing about this and she's done a bunch of stories. Like, is it ending or is it going on? What are those other stories on? Maybe I can suggest something that will enable her to extend this longer and get paid. Oh, how novel would that be? I can help her do her job and get paid.
My entire series on incarcerated kids happened that way. So I did a story for the Washington Post on a police chief who had decided to stop. In Philadelphia, they were locking up kids as old as like young as 10 years old. And so I did a story on this police chief that had decided, like, we're just going to stop arresting these kids and we're going to figure it out. And within a year, and I don't have the figures in front of me, but within a year, like the numbers just plummeted of kids that were being arrested. It was like miraculous. So I did a story on that for Washington Post. And then as a point of doing that story, as an aside, one of my sources on that story said, hey, there's like this issue with solitary confinement for kids and what that does to them traumatically and mentally. And And so as a result of that story, I went and pitched and placed the story, Pacific Standard, RIP, is one of my favorite outlets to write for, on Sacramento's youth detention trying to do away with solitary confinement for kids altogether and what that looked like. As a result of that story, somebody said to me as an aside, hey, you know, kids, when they're in detention in general, don't really get educated. And when they're in solitary, they don't get educated at all. And so then I did a story for The Atlantic on education in solitary confinement for youth offenders. Now, if you were just looking at Molly writes for The Atlantic, you would see one story. But if you were looking at Molly's writing on youth incarceration, there were like a total of 4 or 5 stories, which to me are a series. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter that they're at 5 or 6 different legacy publications. To me, that is a body of work that I care about very, very deeply, that I still want to learn more about and still want to cover. And I'm still looking at now in the context of the pandemic and what's going on in youth detention facilities. These are things that I care about and I still want to hear about. But if you were somebody that was like, oh, Molly McCluskey wrote one story about youth incarceration for The Atlantic, why weren't we in it? And then, you know, I mean, it's a different...
Molly writes for The Atlantic. Let me pitch her another story for The Atlantic.
Great. Let me tell you, I've been pitching The Atlantic for like 6 months and have not cracked back in. So like, I get it.
Yeah.
Editors change, right? But the needs change, and I'm now in California, not in DC, and you know, all these life happens. But it's a way of looking at, you know, I don't think people are good enough about evaluating freelancers almost as our own media entity, right? Mm-hmm. If you pitch a staff journalist a story and that outlet passes, it's passed, it's done. If you pitch a freelancer and I think it's an interesting story, I can be like, okay, well, and it's not time sensitive because there's a huge lag on features for freelancers. I mean, months, right? Months, if not a year or more. But if I think it's interesting, I can pitch my editor at The Atlantic, I can pitch my editor at Rolling Stone, I can pitch my editor at Diplomatic Courier. I can find a way to work that story because it's something I care about and I'm investing my time and my energy and my money in sometimes to get that story placed. So it goes back to the difference of like, I want to mention and I want to link in US News because they have fabulous SEO. I was working on a story for them this morning. And I was Googling some resources and I pulled up this true story. I'm such an idiot, but it's a true story. And the list of like, I did the Google search and the list was like US News story on this topic. And I was like, well, why did they assign me this story if they've already written it? Yeah, it's one of my stories from 3 days ago. And I really hope my editor's not watching because I was just like, you know, look. So that's why if somebody wants to write me and tell me they've read all of my stuff, God bless you. Because
I've even forgotten how much I've written. Yes. But yeah, like it's like, you know, read, see what this is. You know, where are the multiple stories? And you put this stuff on your website. So
it's on my website. It's not a secret about what I write and what I'm working on. And you know, it's just not.
Yeah.
And I source from Twitter all the time. I can't tell you how many. I mean, Ian, I can't tell you how many people I've just shot into their DMs and be like, "Hey, I saw this tweet." Our friend Chris Gillibrand, like, he sent a tweet out, and I was like, "Hey, I'm actually working on a story about this. Do you want to like? Can we talk a couple lines that I can include there?" And it was like, it was done, and it was easy. And I know him, and I've known him for years, and as a source, and he's already vetted, and it's not a problem. But it's the new people that kind of pop up.
Ooh, me too.
Me. Without introducing themselves, without saying hello, without showing they've done any of the research, without following me on Twitter or following me on LinkedIn, not connecting, because I get a lot of empty invitations from people on LinkedIn. I'm like, again, I don't know you. I'm not giving you access to my whole network. Random dude, no. But my work is public. I am a private person, but my work is very, very public.
Right.
So it's not hard to figure out what I'm working on.
Yeah. Well, sort of like when on the flip side that I get on this is like people will pitch me. They want me to review like a networking app and you know, whatever, and they'll show up in my Twitter stream like, we love doing this too, and check out our app. And I'm like, have you read my book? have you given, like, show me a little respect here, right? Like, yeah.
Well, I put out a tweet on, hey, if you're and this was about a month ago, like, if you're a new team working remotely as a result of the pandemic, I want to hear from you because I'm working on this story. And you and I were talking about this too. Within minutes, threads of random tech bros in Silicon Valley, they were like, you should talk to our founder. And I'm like, why? Like, no. You're not following me on Twitter. I don't know who you are. I'm not interested in your founder as a person or their company. I'm interested exactly in the people that I told you. I interviewed Tara Hunt, is the CEO of a small boutique firm in Toronto, about how she was working with her team. I interviewed the Europe Desk podcast team at Georgetown about how they now are running a podcast completely remotely outside of a studio. And I interviewed Ian in Dublin about how his team was now working with contractors and staff fully remotely around the world. None of them was meet so-and-so founder.
God. Or if
I do talk to them and I interview them and they won't, again, it goes back to the black slacks, red sweater thing, right? They're not giving me the information that I'm not here to just hang out with you. Like, maybe at some point we can grab a beer and chat about work and that's cool. But like right now I'm on a deadline on a topic that you said you could speak to, and now you're speaking to something else completely because you think you're going to, I don't know, sway me. I don't know. So yeah, it's a lot of time.
Yeah. Thank you, Elizabeth. Terry, we love that you guys are here, and I'm cognizant of the time. If anyone's got any other questions or you want to pipe in a question, I'm loving, they're just, thank you. And I have to put this up. Yes, we love Molly. Big time for being so ridiculously helpful. All right, let's just sum up our best advice. Understand the journalist job, understanding how they are paid, because that might give you some idea of their interest and attention span. Read what they're publishing about. Have your contact information handy. Have your information up to date. What else?
Boundaries are really important. I mean, we laugh, but I keep a work number and I keep a mobile number, and my mobile number is for my friends, and I have Signal for confidential sources. Do not be calling me on my mobile at 9:00 on a Friday night because you have an idea for a story. Like, absolutely not. There's like working hours. Like, unless it's a breaking news thing or we're all down at the border and you're seeing something, like, but I'm not a breaking news journalist as a rule. I'm a features and investigative journalist. So there's nothing that's going to need to happen same day that I'm going to be on top of 9 times out of 10. I had one source that kept calling me late at night and early Sunday mornings and Mother's Day at one point at like 9 a.m. And he was a source for a foreign government. And I finally said, dude, you need to stop, because like my phone is now being tapped. Because I'm getting all these shady phone calls at weird hours from a foreign diplomat. Like, we need to have some context here of what's going on. So boundaries is important. Manners, basic business etiquette. I mean, don't talk to me like I'm your friend you met at pub crawl like 3 weeks ago on campus. It's not, hey, Molly, exclamation point. Like, no, like, basic business correspondence. Don't pitch me stuff. Don't spam me with press releases. Your first interaction with a journalist should never, ever, ever be a mass spammed press release, ever, under any circumstance. Email a journalist. Say, hey, what are you working on? Can we help? How do you prefer to be contacted? What's the best way to stay in touch with you? They'll tell you. It's not a secret. That's, Yeah.
But email the journalist with that information if you figured out that you have something to offer them, as opposed to rando.
And don't wait till I'm on a deadline, and don't wait until your boss is standing at your desk saying, how many journalists did you contact this week? And the end of the month is the worst time for me to get spams, because I know somebody's about to put together a report of how many journalists they've contacted, and they're like fluffing their numbers, right? So
Right. This is all go to people who are hiring agencies who do that. Do not hire based on volume, because all you're going to get is you know, that agency's emails end up being unsubscribe, spam, delete, block.
Oh, and mine, I've actually, like, I block constantly. I actually had one firm, so like somebody had like left one company. One of my sources had left one company, and it's somebody that James and I know, so I won't say names if James is still on here. Left one company, went to a big PR firm, gave my email to everybody. I got so many spams for months. I finally had to block the entire company's domain name in my Gmail, which I didn't even realize you could do, but you can apparently. So it was like at soandsocompany.com, nobody could reach me because I was just, I had asked politely enough times to be like, hey, I don't really cover this. I don't really care that you're hiring new people. Like, it's not my beat area. James, yeah.
We got a hot. Thank you, James.
It's somebody we both know. But so, you know, it just because you have somebody's email address doesn't mean you should be using it.
Right.
It doesn't mean you should be giving it out. And it's like, you know, if a buddy gives you somebody's phone number, it doesn't necessarily mean they want to date you. It just means that you have their phone number now. Like, good for you, you know? So I would.
Thank you, Lyndon.
Lyndon had asked us on Twitter if we would answer a couple of his questions. Lyndon, did you have some questions that we could answer before we just keep ranting for a little bit?
Yeah, Lyndon, if you've got questions, and and this is another great example. Lyndon has followed me on Twitter for ages, but you have also talked to him, and this was sort of like this triangulation of being able to say, hey, this is like a real person and a really good person and a very generous person. And I always do that now when I have my little Twitter chats. When I see the comments in there, if the person who I'm doing the Twitter chat doesn't know Lyndon or someone else, I'm always like, this is a good friend of mine. They're a real person, like this verification. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, that's one of the things. So it was a habit I picked up when I was living in Washington, where I would introduce people as like a friend or a DC friend, right? Because in DC, everyone's like, oh, this is my friend. I'm like, you're not really friends. Like, did they help you move? No. Did they like join you at a taco party? No. Like, they're like your DC friends. And so I got in the habit. And in California, people don't do that here, so I've had to like break that habit of like, this is like an actual friend. This is like somebody that I would call if I'm having a bad day. Versus, you know, oh, my friend so and so. It's
someone I know. But yeah, as my ex used to say, are they your real friends?
Are they like your imaginary friends that you like talk to when you're locked into your apartment for too long during a pandemic? That doesn't happen, right? That never happens.
That never happens. That never happens. Well, I'm cognizant of taking your time, so that you have been so generous to give to me. Anything else we want to share?
Which is, well, you did a little bit, but I was good. You kept promoting this as a salty chat, and I was like, oh my God, I really hope that I don't cuss.
Well, I was actually kind of worried because, I mean, I get these things, and I'm like, what the fuck? Like, seriously. I get this stuff, or, you know, I sit myself down because I literally walked through this kind of information with some startup founders, and one of the startup founders came to me at the end, and he said, thank you, this was really helpful. And I'm like, great, that's super. He goes, no, this was really helpful. And I'm like,
you don't understand, like they were hurting.
No, they were about to hire a PR firm, and they were about to hire like an intern to do kind of PR stuff for them. He goes, no.
You're hiring an intern just to do pitching.
Right. So he lookks at me and goes, no, this was really helpful. You saved us $125,000. So this is when I have a what the fuck, because I kept getting.
You did that to me as a bonus. Thank you. Like, I'll take it. I have a PayPal.
Right. And like and what this guy realized was from the very much like the conversation we've had, was that there was so much their company could do and should be doing before they even think about like this kind of like outward bound kind of PR pitch kind of stuff. And so this is why I have the WTF moments, because I get these pitches about this, that, and the other thing. And I'm thinking, what are you spending money on? And how much are you spending on? And they're going to justify it saying they sent out 500 fucking emails, right? I promised everyone salty, so I'm bringing out the F-bomb. Bringing out like 500 fucking, we've emailed 500 journalists, like we earn our PR money. I'm like, what the fuck?
Well, and as one of those people who's frequently, I mean, there's like this kind of now famous letter that's going around Cision, right? It's going few years ago. I don't know that they know it's for me, but it's for me. I had a friend who worked at Cision, and the day he took that job, I like let loose on Cision. And he like did not understand why. And I was like, look, they bundle my personal information without my knowledge or permission, and they sell it. My personal information is not for them to sell. And they sell it out to everybody that wants journalist lists. And so Cision says, oh, great, we've got 1,000 vetted journalists for you. They write for all these great outlets, and I'm a commoditized data point, right? And then they send it out, and then these people send out their spam press releases. And I'm like, I have no consent or control over this at all. And so I wrote this scathing, like, this is why you all suck and why your entire business models is garbage and you should cease to exist. And like a very like, and he like passed it around to everybody. And every time they buy a new company, like when they bought Haro,
yep,
my knowledge then was, you know, my information was back with them again. And then I started getting on lists again. And I got an email through, through a router. Like I had a alias at one of my, my newsletters I wrote for, and they wrote to that. And it came through and they're like, hi, I'm so-and-so at Cision. And I just wanted to see what you're working on and how we can help you. And I picked up the phone and I called her. And I called her because I didn't want her to have my actual email address. And I blocked my phone number. I was like, this is Molly McCluskey. You just emailed me. And she was like so startled. Like, because nobody has human interaction. We're all data points of email addresses. And I was like, I've been telling you guys for 10 years, I don't want to be in your database. I think you all are morally corrupt. And there's no circumstance in the world in which you should be giving out my email address. And that lasted for about 6 months.
And then you're like, no.
I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah. But it's just like, no, it's like, when's the right point to pay money for journalists? Like, I remember having a conversation with, it was a former partner at a firm I used to work at, and he was going to get a PR firm. And I'm like, why? Like, here's the stuff you can do on your own and whatever else. And he was then like, well, I said, what is it that you want? And there was like this particular show where he wanted to be sought as the expert. I said, so fine, find the PR firm that's got those relationships and tell them you'll pay them when they get you that.
Yeah.
And if they can't get you that, then why are you paying them? Just to like random spam things? Oh, sorry, didn't get you CNN, but we got you Better Homes and Gardens. Like, no.
So
no.
I'm going to mention a mutual friend. I think James and Antonella and Anna are still here. So my friend Bruce, who I hold up as an example often with his permission. So he's not on this call, but I'm sure he will find out shortly. He's in another meeting right now. I was at the press club during like a blizzard several years ago, and there were like 3 people there. None of us should have been there. We all should have been home, but there were like 3 people there. And this guy is like in a corner on his cell phone talking about global markets and personal finance and having this interview. And I walked up to him. I was like, when he got off the call, I was like, I don't know who you are, but if that's what you're talking about, you and I should know each other. We should know each other. We should exchange information because I write on this topic. And I have interviewed him a couple times over the years, probably not as much as he would like. But that was just an example of somebody that like, I knew that you give interviews on that topic. You now know that I write on that topic, and we are now going to connect. I don't get press releases from him. He doesn't spam me. His colleagues don't call me. But I know that like if I have a question about his area, he's available.
Right. So make yourself available. Do this. You do not need to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars. If you are going to hire PR, you used to remember there was a PR firm that was really good. They basically said, we won't charge you unless we actually are successful. This is...
but then that's also Susanna's my sister. Hi, Suzanne. I love you.
Thank you, Suzanne. So you got to love family members who come and support.
Okay, back to your question about when to hire, right? I think people need to stop thinking about outlets in the traditional sense and think of journalists as their own media entities, because we are. Everybody on this call that's a journalist right now that I'm seeing is their own media entity. And so journalists change outlets. So if you're thinking like, I want a piece in the New York Times, and you work really hard to establish a relationship with one of their journalists, and then that journalist goes over to Bloomberg, that relationship is not wasted, right? that's still a journalist that knows you, knows your work, can count on you as a source. So you really need to think of like, I need to build a relationship with Molly or with Antonella or with Lyndon or Anna, and look at the big picture long term. But back to when you should pay or hire, not when you think you should, right? Because a lot of times when people hire, they're hiring for volume and they're hiring for the fire hosing. Whereas you can say, your job right now is to identify 10 journalists who are working in this space, reach out to them when we don't have a product launch, reach out to them when we are not under pressure from quarterly earnings statements, reach out to them when they're not on a deadline, and introduce, hey, I'm so-and-so. We're working in this area. I'd love to say hi. I have multiple times, especially when I was in DC, not as much in California, but said, hey, I'd love to know what you're working on. I have some free time next week. Let's grab a coffee and just tell me about you and your organization and what you do and where your areas are. I don't turn around the next day. And then they get like, it's when people aren't used to that, it's very like disconcerting. They don't like, are we on the record? Are we off the record? Is there going to be a story tomorrow? Can I place, how do I put this in my worksheet to justify as a metric to my boss? Well, like you don't. That's not
all a relationship, and it will return value at some point in your lifetime.
Well, I interviewed somebody recently. I interviewed a politician who, on a story that wound up getting killed because the outlet that I was writing for kind of collapsed under the course of reporting the story. But we actually still stay in touch because every so often something comes up on his desk, and I'm like, well, I actually don't cover that, but I know somebody else that would cover that. You should talk to them. Or, hey, like, you know, but that's not, I've never done a story that's quoted him.
Right.
But I still consider him a source. And I hope he considers me a resource as well. Right. Because that's the way the world works and the way humans work and the way we engage with each other, you know?
How can we be helpful? Yeah. And when you said sort of like when you buy, when you need these lists, like when my book came out, my publisher's publicist, they sat there and which are the outlets where they write about books and they write about this type of book, or they write about books that may help in these fields, and how does my book fit within that? And that's why my book was reviewed in Working Mother magazine, which still cracks me up to this day. But since I am a woman, I am working, I am not a mother, but just saying.
But back to, I mean, like you say that, but I'm going to add to that and say, when I got your book out of the library and tweeted a photo, hey, it was your book and Chris's book. And I was like, I guess I know where my mind is today. And tweeted a photo of like, oh yeah, I'm reading these great books. You full on mailed me a copy with like a super personal note. I still have it. It's like right there on my shelf. So it's, I mean, you're saying about like the media list, but it really is that personal interaction. Right. And I also have a little thing coming out in the next few weeks too. We are bundling our first 10 profiles of my Diplomatica Embassy profile series. And that's going to be available for a download on a book. So follow me on Twitter. We'll make all that information available when it comes out. But I'm really excited about that. But I have not compiled a media list of people that I will be spamming with that. So.
The rest of us will be screaming it, like your sources will be screaming it from the hilltops. Thank you. And finally, we can really do something, you know, I want to say something for Molly and all the rest of it. But I mean, there's times where you might, but maybe some of this too, is this almost distinguishing between marketing, like PR as publicity as marketing, and the opportunity that too many people, companies, individuals overlook, which is PR is day-to-day operations. i.e., how can I build, like operationally, I will build relationships, I will be able to be found, I will be helpful, and I may be a constant source of information for a media person, as opposed to I have something to sell.
Well, I mean, but we've always looked at marketing versus advertising versus PR in a very linear fashion of marketing is reaching out to your customers, right? Marketing is identifying your target demographics, seeing who might buy your good or product or service, and reaching them. Whereas press, you know, public relations was more of how do we earn trust with media to get them to cover our stories. And I would say you almost really should be looking more and taking a marketing approach to your relationships with your journalists. right? If the whole goal of marketing and identifying your target demographic is looking at who's actually going to buy your product or use your product or who wants it or who is expressing interest in your product, why would you not take that approach to journalists, right? Why would you not take the approach of identifying your target demographics of which journalists cover your beat, is interested in your topic, would actually want to hear from you, and then engage very similarly in the same way? The flip side of that, obviously, is don't add us to your freaking newsletter without, like, I don't want your newsletter. Like, I will opt into your newsletter if I'm interested, but like don't, I can't tell you how many people, like, I'll interview and then I'll never get off of their radar ever for the rest of my life. They will do a blog post and send me their blog post because they think I'm interested in their musings in the middle of the night at 3 a.m. about, the state of global. I'm not. I'll like, you don't. It's okay.
I decide if you're putting out interesting content and I think it's interesting, I'll decide.
I will decide for you, right? It goes back to, I mean, it's really it's courtesy and it's consent. Am I consenting to allowing you to contact me, or are you demanding? Like, are you inserting yourself in my inbox and my life and my feeds? And the people that tweet at you and say, "Oh yeah," and hope for a retweet because you have a huge platform. Like, that's it's lazy and it's rude.
and men do this and women do this, and when they do that on Twitter, it's just like, this is the equivalent of me of someone coming up and asking for a blowjob in a bar. Like, no. Told you it was going to be salty. I had to throw one in.
I've been good, Kelly. I've been so good.
There's no other way of describing it. Is that when people do that, when they come rushing in and, like, on Twitter in particular, and they're like, "Oh, and by the way, and could you talk about us?" It's like, whoa. This hits me the same way as that obscene refrain I just made.
If a strange guy walked up to you and was like, "You're hot, give me your phone number," you'd have certain words for him and probably, like, blow your whistle and run away, right?
Right.
That's what the PR is. It's
right.
Like, "Oh, you wrote for CityLab or you wrote for US News. Here's our press release." Yeah, I don't want your press release.
No.
Did you ask me if I wanted your press release? Did you say hi to me first? Like, basic right. matters. I just don't understand.
Don't hire for the metrics. Don't hire for metrics. All right, we're really going to wrap this up now. Okay, let's just go through. Can you be our top tips? Can you be found? Is your information accurate? Is your contact information accurate? Do you understand the journalist job so you know how quickly to get back to them, how to be responsive?
Are you asking, if you don't know, what is your deadline? Who is this for? What's, it's okay to ask for the scope to make sure that you're getting people into the right person that they need to talk to. Don't ask me to email questions. Like, don't, no. Like, no. I'm not scripting your answers for you. No. Yeah.
You are amazing. I am so grateful for this time and for chance to get salty. I'll probably get banned by YouTube now for using really obscene references or something. But anyway, I said this video was not for kids, so there we go. Thank you everyone who spent time with us today. Greatly appreciate it, and we're signing off.
Okay, bye.